everybody. We are starting Learning Plan 2. I thought the discussion board went very well last week in Learning Plan 1, and it was a great segue into this week's topic, which is firefighter safety. So with this week, we're in Learning Plan 2, and again covering firefighter safety. So we have our safety officer discussion. Initial posts are due Thursday, final post by Sunday. We also have our LAC certification, or the Leadership, Accountability, Culture, and Knowledge module, which is available through the Fire Hero Learning Network. There is a link in Blackboard for that. Make sure you register for a free account and then get started using it. Once you've registered and verified your new account, go into the website, click on the Leadership, Accountability, Culture, and Knowledge module. This is a self-paced module. Once you're done, it'll have a little quiz at the end, and then you'll get a certificate. So then download that certificate. It's usually in PDF form, and then upload that into Blackboard in the appropriate place, and you'll get credit for your work. And then again, we also have the knowledge checks, which are your own personal study tools to identify any potential gaps or things that you're missing in the reading, identify areas where you could go back and read up on it again, or ask further questions. All right, again, this week, Learning Plan 2, we're going to be covering Chapter 2 of our textbook, which deals with firefighter safety and how strategies and tactics applies to firefighter or fire ground safety or emergency scene safety. And firefighter or fire safety and health issues have always been a concern, but it's really surfaced as a priority in the last 25 years. And that's where things where NFPA with the NFPA standard 1500 for Fire Department Occupational Safety and Health Program really provides a framework for occupational safety and health. And then OSHA, which is another Occupational Safety and Health Administration, their regulations really look towards the relationship between fireground safety and health and fireground strategies and tactics. And this includes a review of current standards, regulations, and statistics providing general fireground safety concepts to reduce common causes of injury and death. Along with the specific agencies that provide mechanisms for a safer workplace, we also have the 16 Firefighter Life Safety Initiatives, which was developed by the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. And this came from the National Firefighter Life Safety Summit, where fire service leaders met for 2 days to focus all their attention on one critical concern with every identifiable segment of the fire service represented. They established objectives that included reducing fatality rates by 25% within 5 years and reducing the fatality rate by 50% by 2014. And we know we've fallen a little short of that because our numbers have been steady. So of those 16 life safety initiatives, 7 of them have an application or connection to fireground strategies and tactics. And the first one is going to be focusing greater attention on the integration of risk management with incident management at all levels. And this includes strategic, tactical, and planning responsibilities. Then we have all firefighters must be empowered to stop unsafe practices. Develop and implement national standards for training, qualifications, and certifications, including regular recertifications that are equally applicable to all firefighters based on duties they are expected to perform. Utilizing available technology wherever it can produce higher levels of health and safety. Thoroughly investigating all firefighter fatalities, injuries, and near misses. And we started covering that last week in our discussion boards. It's important. We don't want to sound morbid, but we need to learn from others and where they fell short or what happened, so we can look at strategies for implementing mechanisms of change in our own agencies. And then we look at standards for emergency response policies and procedures that should be developed and championed. And then having advocacy strengthened for enforcement of codes and installation of fire sprinklers in homes. Okay, and looking at firefighter safety strategy and tactics all tied together, we know that life safety is always the #1 priority, right? We go by the acronym LIP, life safety, incident stabilization, property conservation, in that order. So strategies and tactics must be developed and employed on every incident based on the premise that life safety applies not only to the citizen, but also to the firefighters, right? If we get hurt or injured, we can't help anybody. We aren't doing anybody any good. Um, so this clip here recently surfaced from a fire somewhere in the country. I'm not going to name department names or anything like that, but I think you can figure it out from the video. And this plays into our risk assessment, right? We've always gone by the model of risk a lot, save a lot, risk a little, save a little, risk nothing for what is already lost. And I don't know the story behind this video. I don't know if there are reports of people involved or people trapped inside or anything like that. But it really calls into question our risk assessments that we're doing on scene. We have a single firefighter forcing entry or taking a door into a structure without the protection of a hose line, and we know through fire behavior that creating an opening creates, another introduction of oxygen. So he's doing this without the protection of the hose line, starting his helmet on fire, and there's no hose line to be found, so they're not even ready to make entry. So and I don't like second guessing departments because, again, I don't know the whole story behind it. But things like this are good things to bring up in your departments and discuss, why would be a reason we would do this, or what would be the reasoning for not to do this. Okay. And we spoke a little bit about reviewing fireground injuries and deaths. Again, we discussed it in Learning Plan 1 in our discussion board with those reviews. And I thought everybody did a great job bringing in applicable material. But really reviewing the annual injury and line of duty death reports from the organizations that publish them, and then evaluating where and how they occurred and how they relate to us. Okay, so looking at those organizations that publish the reports, we have NFPA, we have the USFA, we have the IAFF, OSHA, and then NIOSH. And all these organizations provide varying degrees and depths of information based on how they collect data, but all of it is useful in improving fireground safety. Okay. Now, some of those agencies we talked about, OSHA is a federal law. They produce regulations, and those regulations carry the weight of the law, and the requirements are mandated by federal and in some cases state and local legislation. So the entire collection of federal regulations is contained within the 50 titles of the Code of Federal Regulations. And some of these mandatory requirements have an impact on fireground operations, and primarily those found in Title 29 of the CFR. These regulations have the power of the law again and are enforced by the federal agency responsible for them. However, some states have adopted federal laws which then become state mandatory requirements. And then when a state adopts a regulation, state officials are going to provide the enforcement on that. And then we have standards. And these are not mandatory compliance, and they're commonly known as consensus standards, where a group of professionals with a specific expertise came together and agreed on how specific tasks should be performed. And NFPA is one of these such standard-making groups, although a lot of places say they're NFPA compliant, NFPA has no enforcement or authority, right? There is no NFPA police that's going to come say, you did this against NFPA, we're going to shut you down. But a jurisdiction can adopt a standard, and then the adopting authority has the legal rights to enforce the standard. So one of these examples would be NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code, adoption by both state and local governments as part of the fire prevention program. And then we have standard of care. This is very well known in EMS, but the concept is relatively simple, where everyone has a certain expectation when it comes to performance. And the standard of care is not a static concept, but instead it's very dynamic, and it often changes with new technologies and the development of regulations, standards, and guidelines. in some of these general concepts of fireground safety, we look at different roles and positions and different things we implement on the fireground that'll help us stay safer. And one of those positions is the incident safety officer. And the assignment and function of the incident safety officer is a key component to minimizing the risk of firefighters and increasing scene safety, serving as a member of the incident commander staff. So the safety officer must be given the authority to stop unsafe acts that are dangerous to responders immediately, right? They often are going to operate in a mobile atmosphere where incident command is supposed to be static. The safety officer is often mobile, and they're going to continually do 360s around the fireground, or maybe they may post themselves where there's a high hazard area going on, but they're really that secondary eyes and ears of the fireground so that the incident commander can stay informed and make those good decisions. Um, we also have our PPE, right? We know that our PPE is designed for firefighting, and that's one strategy in minimizing exposure to hazards at the fire scene, especially those that follow the standards of NFPA 1900 series that set forth requirements for purchasing the PPE and departments operating with it, right? So following NFPA, departments must set standard operating guidelines or standard operating procedures that define the use of their PPE. And although this seems pretty obvious to a lot of people, it's helpful to require the use of full PPE under specific conditions. I know that there's some departments that require you to wear your SCBA mask en route to calls so that you are minimizing smoke exposure on when you arrive on scene and things like that. But this is all going to be department specific, and it's very helpful to have these written down in your SOPs and SOGs to make sure that everyone on your department is compliant, and then you have specific objectives when you're training to meet those standards. Next, we have fireground accountability. And personnel accountability system is a critical element of the incident management process. And these systems can be purchased commercially or designed locally, but regardless of how they're adopted, participation is necessary at all levels, at all incidents, and freelancing is not allowed. This is another great thing to have SOPs or SOGs on to make sure that everyone is trained to the same standard and there's a certain expectation on the fireground of how it's going to be implemented and how it's going to be used. Then we look at rapid intervention crews, and this is what helps us meet those federal requirements set by OSHA and their 2-in, 2-out rule. Um, as such, once assigned a rapid intervention, companies should not be assigned other tasks that would render them unavailable. This doesn't mean that they have to sit in the front yard, but this is where we call in that concept of active RIT, where they can be doing 360s, they can be throwing ladders for secondary means of egress, they can be securing exterior utilities and things like that. Just nothing that would affect fireground operations should they have to drop their task immediately. And a lot of this came out of the Phoenix Rapid Intervention Study, where they performed over 200 rapid intervention drills. And they found that it took an average of 2.5 minutes to get to a ready state. And then from the firefighter distress signal to RIC entry was approximately 3.03 minutes. It then took almost 6 minutes to make contact with the downed firefighter. So the average total time inside the building for each RIC evolution was 12.5 minutes. And it took an average total rescue time of 21 minutes. And 1 in 5 RIC members also got into some type of trouble during these. So they're saying that SCBA bottles rated at 3,000 psi contain about 18.7 minutes of air, plus or minus 30%. Next, as a general concept, and I know there's a lot of places that have SOPs on rehab, but a lot of times it doesn't get implemented very well, or it's a secondary afterthought. But we know that crews that have not been provided with adequate rest and rehabilitation during operations are at that increased risk for injury and illness. And although rehab systems can vary, the basic plan should provide for the following. Establishment of the rehab group, hydration, nourishment, rest and recovery, medical evaluation, and also continued accountability while in rehab. So in summary, each year thousands of firefighters are injured, many of those are killed performing fire service functions, and we can do better. And there's mechanisms in place that can help us do better. Um, so keeping that in mind as you're going through the assignment for this week and you're looking at the discussion on the safety officer and that role within your department and how it's implemented, be thinking about how you can be that mechanism for change within your department and what you can do um, to make things safer and how you can set an example within your department to help make the fire ground a more safe place or implementing items into training that can help make your department safer. Um, I look forward to seeing what you guys have to contribute to this week and keep up the good work.